Welcome to Safety Spectrum, your environmental health and safety connection. This program is a presentation of the Michigan Safety Conference. For almost a century, the annual conference has provided credible educational opportunities and valuable support to the safety and health practitioner by offering 120 instructional programs along with exhibits highlighting the latest in safety equipment, instrumentation, and demonstrations. To learn more about the conference, please find us at safetyconference.org. Welcome to Safety Spectrum. I'm your host, Sheila Ide. This program is sponsored by the Michigan Safety Conference, and our topic today is communication in a multi-generational workplace. Studies have been conducted that found distinct differences between generations, how they think, how they interact, how they relate to each other. Our speaker today will discuss these generational challenges in the workplace. Our guest is Jackie Krawczak, president of Jackie Krawczak, LLC. I first heard Jackie speak at a conference, and she had me intrigued, so I think you will be too. Jackie uses her extensive experience as a leader to share valuable insights with her audiences. Her experience includes past CEO of the Alpena Area Chamber of Commerce and culture and competency development work for Innova Tech Solutions. She's a columnist for the Alpena News, participates on several boards, including a past member of the Alpena Public School Board of Education, a current trustee for the Alpena Community College Foundation, the Industrial Arts Institute, the Sunset Project Board of Directors, and is the current president of the Rotary Club of Alpena. Jackie holds a master's degree from Central Michigan in organizational communication and a bachelor's from Saginaw Valley State University in communication. Talk about working with diverse groups in different ages, Jackie.
Yep.
So welcome to the program.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite.
So can you tell me a little bit about your company, your strengths, your philosophy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started my company somewhere around 15 years ago, but I worked full time with other businesses or organizations in that same time. I started the company because I was already asked to do some keynote speaking and some training for different companies and different events, and I realized I could get paid for it, and I realized I really liked it. So I started the legal structure behind that. And then as time went on, I realized that I really liked it. I love to help businesses and organizations develop their culture. And a lot of times that does have to do directly with their communication, but also their leadership. So it started really as a business to help develop leaders. We put people in leadership roles because they're good at something, like a welder. Well, they're good at welding. That does not mean they're going to be good at leading people. So I was trying to fill that gap in that training, but I realized very quickly that to create cultures, it also takes training of the entire team, not just the leadership. So that's what I do now. And I stepped full-time into the business a handful of years ago. And so I'm traveling around working with clients, and I just love what I do.
That sounds like it. I know we often do. We pull somebody out and stick a white hard hat on them and expect them to be a leader. I mean, they're probably a casual leader anyway.
Absolutely.
But they now they have to do the paperwork. So,
yeah, they're leading by example in many cases, but that's just one aspect of being a good leader.
And motivating others.
Yes.
So could you start with a brief description of the generations that are currently in the workplace, and are their communication styles so different? Okay, I'm a boomer. I'll admit that up front, so I'm okay.
That's okay. And I'm a millennial, so we'll get that off, put that right out there for everybody. So they're in the workplace currently. There are 5 generations. There is one more generation that will be up and coming into the workforce. And in very few cases, like if it's a family business, they might have a younger early teen or something working for them as the law allows. So we're not going to talk about Gen Alpha because they're really not showing up in our traditional workplace yet. But we have traditionalists who are still in the workplace. They are born before 1946. They make up less than 1% of our workplace, and you really see them in fields like CPAs, attorneys, some of those fields where they just continue to work. It's kind of just their lifestyle, and that's what they do. Very, very much still into written, telephone, face-to-face communication. Baby boomers, born between 1946 and 1964, they are currently around 21% of our workplace. They're retiring, and they have adapted to email. They're the fastest rising number of folks on some of our social media platforms like Facebook, but they really do still prefer face-to-face, phone call, and have adapted to email in the workplace. Gen X, or Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980, they're roughly 31% of the workforce today. So not quite the biggest group, almost the biggest group in the workforce. And they really started to blend sort of that between the traditional type of communication and the newer, more digital, faster paced, more immediacy type of communication. Millennials, which you'll also hear called Generation Y sometimes, and I don't know the reason, but it can be confusing.
Tell me
But
why, right?
yeah, right. That's good. I like that. Born between 1980 and 1996, and they are the largest group in our workforce right now at 35%. And they really do prefer multimodal, multi-channel communication. They like digital. They like very fast, immediate responses, and we can thank things like social media, like Twitter or X, for that instant gratification, that instant response. Millennials would also be the reason they like to work in groups, face to face, working in like cohorts and having that real time communication. So when they first started entering the workforce, that was really when we started moving to like the cubicle sort of bullpen type office situation instead of closed door, private conversations, et cetera, that traditionals and maybe baby boomers preferred. And then Generation Z, they're 1997 to 2012, and they make up about 13% of our workforce today, and just moving more toward that digital, multimodal, multimedia type of communication, very instant, very real time. They like that feedback immediately, not at your annual performance review, that sort of conversation and communication.
Well, with all the differences, how do the teams still manage to have effective communication in the workplace? I can see some of the things that you say of what these different groups like to use for their communication things, but have you ever heard talk of the Massey tapes?
Yes.
I mean, that's ancient history. I get it. It's the 80s, but where were you when, type of thing. Because there is quite a difference in what you've experienced as like my father who was in World War II compared to my grandparents who, barely off the farm. And then it moved on. So I don't know if that's still relevant or not, of what experiences you had.
Yeah, it is relevant because there's nothing wrong with any of the generations when it comes to their communication. It we won't get into everything else about the differences in the generations, but specifically about communication, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just the experiences that generations have had is what led to the way that they prefer to communicate. So traditionalists didn't even have the option of some of the digital communication opportunities that we have now. They didn't have instant messaging. They had to pick up a phone. They had to go face to face. We didn't have like right now we're doing this. I think you mentioned, I'm in one place, you're hours away, and then the third person that is helping us with this, she's even further away from us. And we're able to do that, but traditionalists, they couldn't do that. So as generations progress and more technologies are introduced, the cool thing is that we have more choices as to how to communicate. And so it's not necessarily that we have differences in generations and that's the problem with communication. The problem is we want to continue to stick to what we know best and not necessarily adapt to new things and make choices as to what's the best use for the message and the intent that we're trying to get across.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, we can use the technology, but what if you're not comfortable with it? I mean, it's still, I mean, you have to be open to change, but I think every generation, we always say the older folks aren't open to change, but I think some of the younger folks don't want to do some of the traditional things as well.
That's very true. And that's why, I think about it like in medicine. So the very first pill that came out for, let's say, depression, I don't know what it was, but let's say that's still on the market. Just because that's the first one and that's what people knew best, they don't continue to just prescribe that one because new advances come out, new medications, new opportunities. But the first one's still an option, potentially. I think it is. So you have now, instead of just one or two choices, you have dozens, if not more choices. And that's like communication. So we may go back to what worked best for traditionals because that's what they had available. And sometimes a phone call or face to face is absolutely the best option. But sometimes you can do something just as effective with a quick digital message. So it's the businesses that are most successful in their communication consider all of the options and they say, for this message, for this audience, what is the best communication channel and tool that I could use to get this message across?
So whoever's in charge needs to be open to all types of communication. And that was an excellent example of something that was created earlier. Maybe there's something better. And if you
Mm-hmm.
don't ever change, you may not realize that this one may be better. So that's a wonderful example. I like that. So which should be the generation to give in to the other generation?
I love that.
Communication.
I love that question. So all generations should be open. It's not just the traditionalists and boomers and Gen X that have to adapt to the new generation's ways. The new generation should also realize that there is value to a face-to-face conversation. When is that valuable? Well, if you're talking about something serious, or you're going to terminate somebody, or you're going to have a very important discussion where that facial feedback is going to be really important, you should have those face-to-face conversations. So no generation should have to just completely give into another generation's style or preferred way of communicating. All of the generations should be aware of all of the options and be willing to utilize them, again, based on the message, based on the goal. So consider this. If you know that your audience, you have a message for all of your new hires. Let's say there's a group of 5 that you need to get a message out to, and they're all Gen Z or millennials. That message should be tailored to that group. Knowing the type of communication they respond to best, that's how that message should be delivered, because that's how they're going to understand it the best. But if you knew that you were talking with people who are mostly from the baby boomer generation, maybe you craft the message differently and deliver it in a different way.
Well, don't we, since you might have a mixed group, say you have to do a general message to everybody, maybe you have to use multiple types of communication because it seems like you never hear the same message and you might have to hear it more than once. Raising children would be a
Yeah.
good example of they kind of
You
shut down, they kind of
wait, you mean you can't just tell children one message one time and they understand?
I have that happen with adults, not just
Yes.
children.
But you're absolutely right. So I don't know the current statistic, but it used to be that we had to hear a message. I've seen the numbers increase over time. So it was, you had to hear it 3 times, then 5 times, then 7 to 9 times. And I'm sure if I looked up the statistic now, it would be more than that for it actually to sink in and resonate. So businesses can do things like, when we are going to talk about a new safety protocol, for example, we will always put it out verbally in a face-to-face meeting first, and then we will follow up with an email, so you have it in 2 different formats. And that's just an example. It's whatever works for that organization. But absolutely put it out in multiple ways. And it's not that time consuming to do. You just take what you prepared for one type of situation and put it out in another one. So it doesn't take a lot of effort to do it more than one time. Then you give people the opportunity to consume it the way that works best for them.
And not to confuse it, but people learn different ways. Like I'm very uh, visual. Like I
Yes.
can hear something and I get frustrated. I don't quite get it. But if I read it and I have time to research or study it, then I get it better. I'm just one of those people that it works that way.
Yeah.
Some people have to see it. Like I always say, read it, teach it, read it, whatever, and then do it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the same concept. And of those ways, it will resonate with you in the way that fits best for you. So you might hear it and it'd be like, yeah, okay. But then you read it and say, oh, now this makes sense.
Now, how is it best for different generations to communicate with management? How does a millennial or somebody even younger communicate with the manager who may be of a different generation, different style?
Well, again, it has to be on both sides, have to have an understanding that I'm communicating with someone who has a different understanding and different preference for communication. However, in that case, I would coach someone who's a millennial who maybe struggles to communicate with a boss or manager or leader. I would suggest that they learn the preferred style of their leader, and do the best they can to adapt in that situation to the leader's preferred style. Instead of just, I'm just going to do it this way because this is what I'm used to, and it's frustrating that they don't understand. Well, we have a lot of ownership over our communication, and we can't change what anyone else does, but we can change our own behavior. So look at what your leader in that case, how do they tend to communicate? How do things resonate best with them? When is the best time to approach them? Is it a Monday morning? Is it a Friday afternoon? Is it the beginning of the day? Is it middle of, what is the situation? And adapt to their style and what their preferred method is, instead of just getting frustrated that they won't really fully understand our communication to them and the way that we give it to them.
Because you're trying to avoid the shutdown from either side of just not
Yes.
listening to each other. I interviewed a couple of younger female professional safety professionals, and they felt that it is a becoming understanding personal issues and getting personal with people, which
Hmm.
I hate, to tell you the truth. But that was their feeling. They said people like to feel more, maybe that's the team concept that you were talking about, but they said getting to know somebody and being
Hmm.
social with them, that's more, it works better they seem to get people to open up better. And I thought, well, is that everybody or just what their experience is? I thought that was kind of interesting. So they both have pretty high up jobs and they deal with a lot of different folks. And that was how they felt it becomes more personal. I go, I hate personal questions.
I mean, but that's a trend as well in our generations. And again, it's a trend. It doesn't mean everybody. Um, but again, there's that fine line between oversharing. So you have younger generations coming in who want to be personable and they want to see their leaders vulnerable, authentic, genuine, transparent. But also there's a thing about oversharing. So you don't want to cross that line. But absolutely, new generations want that. They want to see you as a real human. We were talking about before we were recording this, if we make a little flub or error or something, instead of redoing it or editing it, let it go, because that just makes us human. And so that's what the newer generations are looking for. And that can be a very difficult thing for somebody from like a traditionalist, who they're so used to holding things close to their, close, and they don't like to be transparent and vulnerable. But our new generations are looking for that in the workplace.
They seem to be more open to it, which I think is healthier, to tell you the truth, with all the mental illness. Now, mental
Yeah.
illness, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to say I'm depressed. It's, those kind of things, that's better. And I remember as a manager when I was still working, that you would have teams or committees and you're trying to work on a project, and how we were taught you need to get everybody to communicate, you get everybody to contribute, and some people just sit back in the corner and they won't talk, and it was a real effort on my part to get their feedback as well and
Hmm.
trying to make it a comfortable. So I'm sure you teach those kind of techniques as well.
Yeah, and it comes down to personal. So what do what would help that person? Do they not feel comfortable speaking in front of a group of 7 people? Would it be better face to face? Maybe you can encourage them to give feedback via email because they don't feel comfortable. Maybe they're waiting to be addressed before speaking. So there are things, instead of just assuming everybody will participate the same way, we're all very different. So it is a manager or leader's responsibility to address, not address the differences, but help the communication flow even with those differences.
Because you really need to hear from everybody. So
Hmm.
often when you're planning something, you need to hear, all right, maybe I'm not seeing all the problems here, but if I don't get this person to speak up, I had one employee who tended to listen to the whole meeting. We'd come to a consensus and then he would bring up all the issues that why it wouldn't.
Ah, yes.
We had a little one-to-one. I said, you're so valuable with your contributions, but if you don't bring them out at the time we're trying to decide a course of action, it's not really helpful.
Well, and that's where I coach clients and set communication boundaries and expectations. So make it part of your culture that we share our input before the decision is made. And so if you have something to say, you say it before. And there's certain things you can do. And this one seems silly, but this is a thing that businesses, some will say, is we never CC everybody. We only BCC unless we truly want everybody's reply all. So if you're asking something like, "What I'm getting lunch for everybody, what do you want?" You're going to BCC that, because I don't need 100 messages about turkey sandwiches and vegetarian options. But only do that. Our expectation here is that you always BCC unless you truly want everybody's reply all. So there's rules and expectations we can create for our cultures, instead of just, well, let's just see what happens and how this goes.
That's kind of scary.
Yes.
So where do these different communication styles come from? How were they developed?
Yeah, it's really how we were raised and what experiences we had. So there's, in every generation, there's like defining moments. So you said that you're from baby boomer generation. What stands out to you from your generation as like a thing that everybody will always remember happening?
Motown.
Yeah. Okay.
The Vietnam War was a big part of our life, but it wasn't a war that people talked about,
Okay, so that, realize it consciously or not, that had a direct impact on how your generation learned to communicate. So you learned, we don't talk about this topic. And,
Yeah.
for whatever reasons, we don't have to go into that. For millennials, for myself, you think about um, what happened during that time when we were raised and what communication things like happened and changed. You think about the people in the generation that went through COVID or went through 9/11. That absolutely impacted the way that they learned to communicate. Then add on top of that all of the um, innovations and technology and new ways of communicating, digital, all of those things. That's really what has formed our communication styles.
It's interesting because, when you talk about what happened when, the time that I was a teenager, we're talking 60s, 70s, there was a lot of change going on. There was,
Hmm.
civil rights, all of this stuff. It all came to the forefront, women's rights, that kind of, so it was a big changing time for us, I think.
Hmm.
I think we really shook up the whole, but I think that's what every generation's supposed to do.
Well, I think so too. And I like watching I observe behavior a lot, and I really like watching what happens when somebody has a face-to-face conversation on a controversial topic versus an online interaction where they're not really interacting. They're just, I say this, you say this, I respond, you respond, but an actual conversation. And we are missing the value of actual conversations in our life. And I think that's something that any leader could, whatever generation they're from, I think having real conversations could add a lot of value to workplaces.
It's funny, these younger folks were telling me that they want to have the personal relationship, but then again, they're more comfortable texting or using the text. It's like it's kind of a oxymoron there or something. I don't
I
kind it's weird.
I just I did a bunch of focus groups at a community college, and that was something that I picked up on too, is that the students are saying we want more interaction, we want more social things we can do together, but yet then they turn around in the next question and say, well, we text all the time or we sit in our rooms and don't ever open our doors. Those two things can't happen at the same
Well, you think
time.
COVID had a lot to do with that? I mean, I don't know. Maybe COVID changed everything.
I really do think so. And I think it's on those leaders who understand the damages that COVID had on our communication. I think it's really on them to help facilitate bringing back some of that real conversation. There's a book by Celeste Headley. It's called We Need to Talk. And it is a phenomenal book about this exact topic, is how we have lost the art of conversation.
Because it's easier, especially on something intimate or emotional, whatever, to text it rather than have that conversation.
Oh yeah.
But you can't tell what the emotion is behind it when you're using texting, and it
No.
gets misunderstood. I just heard something the other day that said that just answering okay is almost hostile in a way.
Yeah.
It's weird because you don't think about words having that much impact, but they do.
Well,
So
then
what's the,
add, oh,
go
I
ahead.
say then add the difference between genders. So if a woman says to a man, okay, or a man says to a woman, okay, one of them's going to overanalyze and think way into that and what that could mean. So there's so
So,
many dynamics.
let's not go down that road.
Yeah, I know.
What's the biggest mistake people make in the workplace when it comes to communicating in a multi-generational environment?
The biggest mistake that I see, and that statistics would support as well, is just continuing to communicate the way you've always done it. Just I am just an email person. I'm just always going to email. That is a mistake because, like, back to the whole pharmaceutical comparison that I made, there are new ways that might be better than that email. It doesn't mean you can never use email. It just means that this conversation would be better face to face, or this conversation would be better as a written handout bulletin or something. Um, Sticking to the one thing we're most comfortable with is the biggest mistake that people make.
Especially in the safety world, we want to be sure that something dangerous is communicated correctly or the proper procedure. So it behooves us, like you say, to use the multiple forms of communication. So if organizations know communication is a challenge, why don't they do more to fix the issue? They're not aware of it?
I love this. No, organizations, my clients tell me that communication is a major problem and they want help with it. Statistics support that communication is a major problem, like leading to lots of money left on the table that because of communication problems. And I think that you and I can probably both identify things we've been involved in that could have had better communication. So we're all familiar with poor communication. The number one reason why we don't fix it, even though we know it's a problem, is because we think it's somebody else's responsibility.
Ooh, ouch.
Yeah, we think,
So
well,
if you
I'm
don't understand me,
communicating.
it's your problem, right?
Exactly. And I like
Wow.
to talk with clients about where does the meaning of a message lie? At the end of our conversation, where does the actual meaning of the message lie? Is it with the sender or the receiver?
Of course, there's different types of conversations, obviously, in the workplace we're focusing on right now, but you have to be sure that the same message is communicated to both of you, that both of you reach a level of understanding. So how do you
Yes.
find that?
So we have to do things like, because the message is whatever I walk away with is what I believe is the meaning of the message. Whatever you walk away with is what you believe is the meaning of the message. And so we both think we understand. And we tend to say things like, okay, here's the new safety protocol. Do you understand? Well, your answer is going to be yes, because in your head, you understand, even if it's not the intended understanding. So instead, we should learn to ask questions like, can you tell me in this situation, if this were to happen, go through the new process with me? What did you just learn? What does this new protocol look like? Can you give me a summary of what we just talked about? Instead of just, does that make sense? Because we're going to say yes, because in our heads it does.
Yeah, training is so difficult to be sure that you have covered everything. I used to, when I do confined space training, I would take
Mhm.
over a week to go through all the protocols, the instrumentation, the enter, like, the whole, it takes a lot. And then you have them demonstrate to you. And I
Yes.
still had a bad accident where I almost lost two people in a sewer.
Hmm.
So, you then you go back and you say, okay, so you have to go back and look at what happened in this situation. How could we have done it better? How could we have communicated it better? And I ended up using those two people to train after that.
Okay.
I've been
Well,
there,
and
done that.
you can do all the training in the world, but I mean, accidents still happen, unfortunately. But if there's a miscommunicated, sorry about the wiggle, if there's a miscommunication, that can be addressed in future training. Like, let's change this because it clearly didn't come across the way we needed it to.
But we need to go back and review everything, whether there's an incident or not, or a near miss. You
Yes.
still have, and that's part of our toolbox is to go back and review situations and look at
Hmm.
incidents and could we have done it better? What does a near miss tell us? That type of thing. So why do you think this topic is important?
Well, it is not just important to safety in businesses. It is important to business across the board, any topic in business. It is important to our relationships. When I step back and I look at, say, marriages that aren't, maybe they're struggling, I would say 99% of the time I can point to communication problems they're having. And that's a big reason why the relationship is struggling. Same thing in organizations. When there's a problem, so often, almost 100% of the time, it's a lack of effective communication, misunderstandings, an unwillingness to actually have a conversation and find common ground and work from there.
Now you work with a number of different groups in the Alpena area. I'm sure that you have different age groups and different ideas. I would think working in a foundation, with a foundation, you've got to have some folks that may be the money folks or
Mhm.
maybe conservative. And I mean, how do you get them to come together?
Conversation. You invite them to have an actual conversation and put some structure to it. That's something else that really, it really bothers me when someone says, "Hey, let's have a meeting," and you show up and there's no agenda, there's no structure, there's no leadership of that meeting. How can you be productive if you don't even know this meeting will be successful when? Like, what are we driving toward? So having conversation, but also there's been a trend in the last, I don't know, decade or maybe more than that. Instead of blanket communication, so I worked for a chamber of commerce for many years. When I first started, it was let's put the same message out to all of our members and they can take from it what they would like to take from it. Well, then we started separating our members into groups and tailoring our message specifically to the group because of those differences in understanding. And that seems to be better received because it's tailored to them. So it might have, if there's so many ways you can separate members, but if you know you're talking, like I said earlier, if you know you're talking to a younger generation, tailor your message differently to them.
It's funny. I saw a demonstration once about how people were getting along. So they just took some basic things and they took the group and they said, all right, how many people are married? Move to this square. How many people have children? Move to this square. How many people do this? How many people ride motor? It was interesting. Disparate groups realized that they had more in common than they had differences. I,
Absolutely.
I thought that was really interesting to see something like that.
I
I
love that.
sometimes young people are eager to prove themselves as well,
Yes.
and they're not, maybe willing. And I count all people when they're young. I'm not saying a
Hmm.
generation thing, but how do you how do you work around it? You still want them to be ambitious and want to prove themselves, but how do they communicate with the uppers that I want to get ahead? I don't want this isn't just a job to me. It's part of my life, and I want to enjoy it. And so, how do they communicate that
How
desire?
how does the young person communicate that, or how does
Yeah,
the
yeah, because
oh,
you want to encourage young people to go out there and try to achieve what they can or rise up in a company if that's what they want to do. But how do they communicate that without being disrespectful to the older
hmm
folks?
Well, and again, that has to be both sides. It has to be someone who a younger person in a new career or just entering in their career. I would love to see them adopt the growth mindset and look at all these people with a lot of knowledge and history that I can learn from and add value to. But then you also have to have the other generations who have been there for a long time be willing to share that knowledge and information, but also understand that this new person could add value in ways that I don't realize yet. So both have to have an open mind and understand that generations can add a tremendous amount of value to one another if they're willing to talk about it openly and honestly and without ego getting in the way.
That's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. There is knowledge to be gained from experience. There's also new ideas that need to be explored as well. So how we do that is, like you said, open conversation. So have you got any final thoughts?
Well, I think about like safety, and that's been your world for a very long time, right? How many years have you been in the safety
Probably
field?
more than 40.
More than 40. Okay. So you can probably think of things that you learned lessons about along the way.
Being a female in a non-traditional job was one of them.
Yes. So
Having a
you,
sense of humor and, just going with the flow, but being stern when you had to be assertive when you had to be, but not take everything to heart.
yeah, so you could mentor a new female in that industry and they could learn so much from you, but you can also learn from them. So I think my final thoughts are kind of along the lines of we just have to have a more of an open mind and think, I have value to add, they have value to add, and how can we blend that value to make us even greater coming together than we would be as individuals just working in our jobs? What
I
is
love
there's
that.
a like the quote that's like the whole is greater than the sum of the parts or something like that. But it's
Yeah.
the kind of that concept of we're both here for the same reason. We are working for the same mission at the end of the day, whatever our organization's mission is. How can we both add value to get to that mission and deliver it more strongly with the strengths we both have?
That's very well said. Appreciate that, Jackie. Our mission with the Michigan Safety Conference is to enhance workplace health and safety by sharing EHS best practices, provide education, and create a community of experts to help eliminate workplace injuries and fatalities. But key to all human interaction is how we communicate with each other. A bad day can translate into a tense encounter, which may have been completely unintended. As EHS professionals, we need to know how to impart information and advice in ways people can understand in our overall goal of eliminating accidents. Thank you to Jackie Krawczak. She can be reached at jackie@jackiekrawczak.com. If you have any questions about this podcast, the Michigan Safety Conference, or would like to be a guest or sponsor one of our podcasts, information can be found on our website at michsafetyconference.org. Thank you for listening to Safety Spectrum. This is Sheila I.